and welcome to the podcast, The Magic Of, with Paul Rothman, and my special guest today is my friend, Patric Caird. He's from Canada. Apparently that's a place. And he's come to Los Angeles, been living here for a long time. He is a writer and composer of music for film and television. Very exciting. So I'm delighted to have a little chat with my friend and find out exactly where he came from and what he does. And here he is, Patric. Hello.
Hello, Paul.
Well, that's it. I think we've got everything we need.
Now you know everything.
Now we know everything. So, lovely to have you here.
Thank you.
And you've been in LA. How long have you been in Los Angeles?
15 years.
Great.
Yep.
15 years. And interesting time. We're in the middle of some crazy, crazy times. But
What do you mean? What's going on?
Oh, I don't know. The weather. A lot of weather happening.
Okay. Yeah. I haven't left the house in 4 months. I don't know.
Well, let's start there. You haven't left the house in 4 months. So we're in the midst of the global pandemic. So if anyone's listening to this in the future, it was a thing that happened in the past. We're all right now. We've just grown a third arm. And how have you been? How has it affected you?
You know, honestly, as a film and TV composer, you don't really leave the house ever. So nothing's changed.
Mm-hmm.
I wash my hands a little bit more.
And so are you feeling positive going forward?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I think we'll get this sorted out in 2 or 3 years. And I think we should be good.
Great. So I look forward to seeing you in 2024.
Yeah.
25?
Yeah. We won't be having our regular get-togethers until probably middle of this decade.
So we met in 2010, and I came over to your house, which to watch the MMA fighting.
That's right. That's the only sport I watch.
You actually, it's true. I mean, you have no interest in any other sport. I've tried to get you onto football.
Sports are only good for metaphors.
But why MMA?
Oh, it's so good. Actually, I think we've had this conversation. There's a component to it. It's not about the violence and the blood and all that crap. It's more of the spiritual aspect, the spiritual self-discipline aspect of these elite athletes pushing themselves to the absolute limit of their capabilities. So you can work out in a gym, you can spar with a partner, you can do all this stuff, but only when you actually go head to head with another person who's done the same level of homework as you have, can you find your weaknesses and strengths. And I think it's an enormous test of the human spirit, and I love it.
Excellent. Well, it's, I've been coming over to your place for many, many events, and also cooking. Food has been the other really important factor.
I love to cook food.
You definitely do, and it's always a delight. What's in store of an evening? So
I kind of cycle through the same 3 or 4 dishes, basically.
they're my favorite dishes. So it's
fine. You sweet man, yeah.
I'm easy, just cook me some food and I'm there. Nice bottle of wine.
I've noticed that about you. Yeah.
It doesn't matter what we're watching. So you came over from Canada and you came to Los Angeles. Why? Why did you come here?
All right. Well, I was writing music for TV and film in Canada for years, and there's a bit of a glass ceiling thing that happens there. I was working on American shows, but working on, they would ship them out to Canada, and I thought, well, I would like to get out from under this glass ceiling. I'll go to LA, and I love Los Angeles. I just think it's fantastic. I love being here. And
what is it you specifically like about it here?
I'm from Vancouver, Canada.
Mm-hmm.
It's rainy most of the time there. I like the sunshine here. I like the warmth. I love the city and the history of the city. And I love the television and movie business. And then, like, when you're in I remember one of the first times I came down here, I brought my kids to Disneyland, and I said, we'd be out at a restaurant, and all the conversations at the other tables were about the movie business or the TV business. Not all of them, but many of them. They weren't talking about sports. They weren't talking about logging or fishing. They were talking about making movies, and I love to do that. So I felt like, oh yeah, this is where I want to be.
Did you feel, one of the things that's leveled against America or Americans and the film business and all of that is that it's a bit hokey, it's a bit, people talk a good game. Did you find, I mean, I actually found it very genuine in, not how it was described to me, and people say, oh, they just talk about it and it's all nonsense. But my experience here has been that people have actually done what they've said they were going to do.
Yeah, or at least that's their intention. I mean, sure, you're going to get talkers everywhere, but I had the same experience when I came here. I found it really an exciting place to be, where you could actually push forward and do something and achieve goals and get results.
So yeah. So whereabouts did you grow up then?
I was born in Vancouver on the left coast of Canada, and then raised in Toronto, and then I went back to Vancouver for my last year of high school. Pretty much that was my home base. I did some meandering around, came to the States I was a jazz saxophone player. That was my main raison d'etre from the time I was 16.
What got you into that? Why saxophone?
Actually, interesting, I guess. I was in grade 7, and I wanted to take. I was really into theater and theater arts. I wanted to take theater arts, and I wanted to take French. In Canada, it's one of those courses that you take. Mm-hmm. And the only other option on the schedule that was available to me was band. Was that grade 7? No, it was grade 9.
How old is that?
14.
14.
And it was grade 9. And so I'd already been in some of the theater productions in grade 7 and 8. And I wanted to stay. I was actually I wanted to be an actor back then. And the only option open on the schedule was band. So I had to decide. I didn't know what band was. Bands were like the Beatles when that's what I thought. That's what a band was. I didn't know what a trumpet was or a flute or anything like that. And I had to pick an instrument, which I had no idea even what was available. I was watching television one night and the Lawrence Welk show came out. I don't know if you guys know what the Lawrence Welk show is. It's like it was a small orchestra, and they would do like popular songs, covers of popular songs, and this guy would wave his baton. And this one particular night on the Lawrence Welk show, he was doing instruments of the band thing, and he went through each one of them. And the trumpet player stood up and he goes, now here's the trumpet. And the trumpet player played the trumpet, and I went, oh, that's pretty cool. I guess I could do that. And here's the trombone. And the trombone player stood up and did his thing. And now the tenor saxophone. And he played the tenor saxophone, stood up and played, and it all was the same, but the tenor saxophone looked like the coolest guy to me. So I went, I think I'll play the tenor saxophone. Took one home for the summer, didn't touch it, and wound up in grade 9, first day of band class, really knowing nothing. And the band teacher said, okay, well, you go into the practice room and take these books. And during the school I was going to had 4 classes a day, and each class was 80 minutes long. So they were a big chunk of time. So he sent me into that room, and he said, I'll come and check on you in a few weeks. And so I went through the books, and when I got finished with the books, I started to, I ran out of stuff to do, but I was trapped in this little, a practice room in the middle of the large band room, and I couldn't get out. So I had to come up with something to do. So I started trying to play songs I heard on the radio and blah, blah, blah. And anyway, by the time he came and checked on me, I had sort of developed past the kids in the class, so that I came out of the little room and they put me in the big room. And that was sort of the beginning of me playing the saxophone.
What music were you listening to at the time? What was the...
Oh, I'm talking on the radio, like the theme from The Godfather, or, pop songs on the radio.
So, what kind of person were you? What kind of kid were you? Were you a rebellious sort, or you were very focused?
No, I was like a solid C+ student. I was a little bit sporty, but not really. I played hockey. I was Canadian. Everyone played hockey.
Right.
Especially, this was back in Toronto, so I did that, and was interested in the arts and reading a little bit. I wasn't really particularly, but as soon as I got into music, my attention my attention shifted a little bit. And then in grade 10, when I moved to another school, and the music teacher was a Hungarian Canadian who played the saxophone, and he was brilliant. He was a great saxophone player and an incredible personality, and really forceful. Frightening, actually. He'd escaped Hungary as a kid, and come to Canada, and was very intense about being living in Canada and working hard. And so he frightened the crap out of all of us. And so I practiced harder and harder and harder, and got better at the saxophone, and wound up in a saxophone quartet with him and two other students in that school. And then I remember specifically the day that I first heard John Coltrane. Kids were playing records at the back of the band class, and someone put on a John Coltrane record. And I'd heard a bunch of jazz stuff before. I'd heard all the, the Stan Getz and the Sonny Stitt and a bunch of guys, the guys you would normally hear. And then someone put this record on, and it just, like, the sound of it just totally changed my life. And from that moment on, I read everything I could about Train, and I started practicing 4 hours a day. And, as I guess I was 15 then, and that was sort of the beginning of the obsession with the saxophone. That it's arguable that it worked out okay.
Did you think, I worked in the jazz section at a record store called HMV in London, and that got me really into jazz. And I think, like, Coltrane, Blue Train is a really accessible entry into jazz. And the album that I think he's on it, is the Cannonball Adderley, Something Else. Isn't he on that?
Yeah, I think he is.
And that's a brilliant album to get into. When people used to say, I kind of like jazz, what should I listen to? I used to give them something else. Just listen to this. Or Blue Train, or Oscar Peterson, Night Train, or any of those things. And I think they're a great way to start delving into that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it was with Coltrane. It was something about the sound of his saxophone that sounded like nothing I'd ever heard before, and that's what just got me zeroing in. And then, of course, his incredible technique on the instrument, and his work ethic. The legend is he would play a set at a club, and then while they took a break, he'd go into the bathroom and keep practicing. He'd tap him on the shoulder and say, "You got to go out for the next set." And he'd just basically go out and keep going, keep doing his stuff.
So I'm always interested as well, musically. Do you find is it an emotional connection? Is there the sound and emotion connection versus the mathematical version of music?
It was all about the emotional thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
Again, attracted to that sound, that it just, like, went straight into my soul when I heard it the first time. And then, then you start to go home. The technique of what this guy is doing is astounding. I mean, you mentioned Cannonball. Cannonball was had a beautiful sound. There's no question. Had fantastic technique, but it didn't speak to me the way Train did,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
it's interesting, you know, and it's funny at this point now, after X number of years, I know that people would play for me Duke Ellington or Oscar Peterson or stuff like that, or Bill Evans, and I couldn't find my way into it because I was too busy listening for that sound that I heard in Coltrane, that you only heard in a certain kind of music, kind of an Afro jazz kind of music, and you know, how to describe it. It's a searching kind of sound that I didn't hear in Cannonball. I didn't hear in Bill Evans. I heard introspection in Bill Evans, you know, and in Duke, I wasn't ready to hear that. And then I kind of feel like now, years and years later, I like to say, you know, the older I get, the better Duke Ellington sounds to me.
Right.
You know? And it's like, because I think maybe I know that I've outgrown that sort of feeling that there's got to be some kind of angst or you know, purpose, and that it can just be music because music is beautiful and cool.
And do you think, is the pop music still accessible to you?
Today's pop music?
Or be it from the past or now, or... I mean, one of the things I noticed, I mean, I think the 80s was a particularly fertile time of pop music, and writing, and I find it interesting when I look back at bands, I don't know, like Duran Duran or Boy George or those sort of people, or I don't know, the Smiths or any of these bands back in the day that were fashion-led. So I wasn't, if you weren't into that kind of that fashion, you weren't really into that music. You couldn't look at it, you know? So I mean, I remember Duran Duran, and I remember liking some of their stuff, but I wasn't, you know, that wasn't my style. Or like for me, when I was about 15, it was Prince and Guns N' Roses, probably.
Okay.
Which, you know, they're still cool. They still wrote great music, but but it's funny retrospectively going back to some of these bands, like Duran Duran have been on various social media things. The bass player, is it John Taylor? Is he the bass player? I can't remember. But he's been talking about how he constructed music and played the bass, and they worked with Nile Rodgers, and, you know, suddenly you look at it and you go, oh, yeah, actually, as musicians and writers, interesting, and their development and where they're influenced by. And suddenly you look at, you strip off the fashion aspect of being a kid, and I'm not, you know, that's not my thing.
Yeah, right.
And you go, oh, wow. Or you hear about writers who wrote for pop stars, and you go, oh, wow, they're very, very clever writers.
Yeah. I don't think, you know, I don't think any of those people get to that level without, it's not by accident that they're there. They've got talent and insight and charisma, and often they're beautiful to look at, you know, and so it's not an accident that people wind up being stars.
And so, I mean, would the Beatles have been a major factor for you?
When I was young, like when I was, I remember being 6 years old and seeing, you know, Beatles records around the house and stuff like that. And same with Simon and Garfunkel records were around the house, that sort of thing. But I mean, yeah. And I would get, like, for a birthday present, I was just actually remembering birthday or Christmas, getting the 45 of, I think it was Get Back was on side A and Something was on side B. And I got a 45 of that on the Apple label. And you do know what a 45 is, don't you?
Yes.
Okay, good.
For those who are too young, perhaps you'll explain. It's a record.
Yeah, it's really... yeah, it's about 7 inches in diameter, and it rotates at 45 revolutions per minute or per second. No.
Per minute.
Per minute.
Yeah. RPM.
Per second. That would be, RPM.
Yeah.
And and the other thing I got was a glow-in-the-dark Frankenstein model and a big tube of glue. So that might have been my first experience with getting high and listening to the Beatles.
Okay, yeah, let's getting high and listening to the Beatles. I mean, was that something that is that intrinsic? Is that connected in the music industry? The drug side of things?
Oh my God. Yeah, well, certainly it doesn't have to be, but you have to think that when you're a working musician, when you go to work, everyone's playing. They go out to party. So the atmosphere that you walk into when you're going to the office is like everyone's getting loaded, everyone's drinking, everyone's getting high, everyone's trying to get laid. And so that's the milieu that you wander into. So temptation is pretty unavoidable. It's hard to avoid it.
And what are we talking now? Maybe you're about 18, 19?
Yeah, I started gigging when I was 18. Yeah. I dropped out of college and started working in blues bands, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
How was that? Was that exciting time, or was that something that was a means to an end, or did you have an end game? Did you think, right, I want to be in a band, or I want to write music for something specifically, or?
At that time I was still very much a jazz guy, but you couldn't pay the rent on $30 that you made at a coffee shop, for playing Stella by Starlight. But I could get a gig in a blues band, as the token saxophone player, and or sometimes in a section, and make $185 a week for 8 shows, and that would pay my $115 a month rent, and it was that. But during the day, I'd play at night, and during the day, I'd practice for 4-6 hours, keep practicing jazz music, and then try to do as many jazz gigs as I could. I actually wound up. I didn't actually go to school. I dropped out of college, but I studied privately with people, and I received a grant. There's an arts funding agency in Canada called the Canada Council, and back in those days, they would give you money if you were good to go study with people. So I got a grant to go study in New York for a year. I went and did that. And I went to I went to the Banff School of Fine Arts and studied there for 3 months with very heavy musicians: Dave Holland, Joe Henderson, Dave Liebman, Julian Priester. I mean, there was a lot of guys. I was still very much a jazz dude while I'm playing the blues rent gigs, So the end game was to continue to be a jazz musician.
And was America in your sights?
Oh my God!
Oh, hello.
I forgot to go do not disturb. Was
America in your sights at that point?
Absolutely. New York was Mecca,
right,
for jazz. So I remember being 18 years old and hitchhiking down to San Francisco, and where I heard, no, I didn't hear Stan Getz on that trip, but I played at the UC Berkeley campus with a drum circle and busked on the street to make money for the $17 a night it took. The hotel room was on Telegraph Avenue. And, I was constant. I used to joke that I was an American embryo implanted in a Canadian womb. And I was constantly like running the border, getting down to the States, and then getting nervous and going back to Canada when I thought the heat was on or I couldn't make enough money. And I did that. I did that when I was 18. I did it again when I was 19, but I went to, was that it? I went down to Texas. I wound up in Texas. I had a girlfriend in Vancouver. Her visa expired. She went home to San Antonio we did the long distance thing on the telephone where it cost like $1,000 a minute. And that stopped making sense pretty quickly. So I just sold everything I had, took my horn, and hitchhiked down to San Antonio to be with my beloved. And once she realized that I couldn't work, our relationship soon ended. And I wound up sort of bumming around, and I wound up in Nashville, Tennessee. And I lived there for 6 months or so. I showed up on a Monday and crashed at a friend who I'd met in Austin at his place, and he was a bass player, and I was working on Tuesday. And that weekend, the weekend before I showed up, the sort of R&B sax player had left town on the road with a country act. And so there was a saxophone-shaped hole in all these sort of R&B bands in Nashville, and I just sort of fit myself into that space and really got quite lucky working with some amazing musicians for as long as I could hold out. Eventually I had to leave. I got nervous about immigration. I'd been there for a long time. And so I wound up weaseling my way up to New York again, and then into Canada, Toronto.
So you're back in Canada at that point. So what?
Yeah, and I was 20, I guess, at that point. Yeah.
And had that lit the flame then? Were you like, I like this. This is where I want to be. I mean, have you always made a living being a musician?
Yeah.
Were you ever doing other jobs, or you managed to do that?
Okay, so I was. I guess I was a little bit better than the C+ students in school, and I managed to graduate early in order to practice to go to college, because I thought college was this really hard thing. So I didn't realize it was just the next grade. Like, who studies over the summer to go to grade 10 to grade 11? Nobody. But I thought it was going to be difficult. So I graduated early, and I'm practicing all day long, and my parents would get up and go to work. And as soon as I heard the car doors slam and leave the garage, I'd get up and make my tea, and then I'd sit there and practice all day long. And then at 5 o'clock, I knew they'd be coming home around 6. So I'd tidy everything up, and I'd be sitting at the, kitchen table with another cup of tea, and they'd walk in and they go, "So what did you do all day?" And I said, "I practiced," and my mom didn't believe me. No one believed me, because the house looked exactly the way it did when they left. And she got me a job in an office, which was heartbreaking. She told me that like on Sunday night. She said, "Well, tomorrow you have to be up at 10 or up at 8 and be at work by 9. I go, "What are you talking about?" "Well, I've got you a job." And I said, "Well, I already have a job." And she goes, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, I'm practicing." And she goes, "Oh, Patrick, don't be silly." And so I went off to the job dutifully, the dutiful son, and I managed to save enough money to buy a new saxophone and move out. So
were they? What were your parents? What did they do? Were they creative people, or?
No. I mean, they were not artists. My dad worked for the airlines as a salesman in the airlines for Qantas, and my mother was this back in the days when you could have a job and raise a family of 4 and own a house and drive a car and take vacations. It's not possible anymore. But my mom was from Belfast. I think we talked about that.
Oh, right.
And she was a mom. She was great at it. And then she got kind of bored once my brother and I went to school. So she worked as a secretary, and she had great typing, secretarial skills. And so that was that. They were not particularly artsy. I mean, my mom liked to sing, and my dad was, they had all the sort of requisite Beethoven sonata type records laying around, and Nat King Cole records, I remember well. But they weren't particularly inclined, but they were very supportive once they realized I was serious enough to move out.
Yeah.
They kind of went, "Oh, I guess he's serious,"
Interesting. Okay. And did she have the Irish accent? Did she keep that?
After a few, she'd have an Irish accent. It came and went. What are you be doing there, Patrick?
So how do you transition then from playing the saxophone into writing scores and music for film and TV? Where does that... maybe it's the obvious...
Well, I don't know that it's so obvious. I wound up having kids quite early, completely by accident. It wasn't planned. But the first year my son was in existence, I was on the road for 180 days. So I missed his first steps. I missed his first words. All of that sort of thing. I was working in a very popular band in Canada, and to be working 180 days a year, touring the country was great, but and I made decent bread doing it, but I was missing my life in a way.
And that was pre-FaceTime and Skype and all of that.
Oh my God,
so
yeah.
You wouldn't see anybody.
It wasn't $1,000 a minute for a phone call, but it was 100. And so, even phone calls were something you considered very seriously before making it. And I kind of thought, I should try to figure out a way to make a living without having to be away. And so as I mentioned, I loved acting and actors. I was a big movie fan, a television fan, and because I was a decent musician, I did quite a bit of studio work. And the leader of the band that I was in, it was a band called Powder Blues, which had a big hit in the early 80s.
What was it called?
The hit?
Yeah.
Doing It Right on the Wrong Side of Town.
Doing It Right on the Wrong Side of Town.
Yeah.
That's definitely, we'll have to find the link for that.
Well, do you remember Huey Lewis and the News was a big deal, and the Blues Brothers movie was out back then? I mean,
yeah.
It's probably you're probably too young for this, but there was a huge blues resurgence in popular music, bands with horns. And so that was in the 80s. And so, the Powder Blues, they were a great band, and they wrote great songs. So I was really lucky to be in that band. But I had to figure out a way to make a living that wasn't away from home.
But we had the whole British resurgence of blues, the bands like the original Fleetwood Mac and the Blues Breakers, and all those guys were bringing original kind of blues music that hadn't been popular to a more commercial audience. And
I would argue that that's what the Rolling Stones did.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And to a great extent, so did the Beatles. But the Beatles were more of a music hall. It's kind of like, that's, for me, this is the Beatles or Stones argument. It's kind of like the Stones were a bad blues band that invented a new kind of music.
Yeah.
Because they probably would have loved to sound like Robert Johnson, but they weren't going to, and the Beatles were kind of like more of a British music hall band that loved American music, so they came at it from a slightly more sophisticated musical point of view. And then when you mix George Martin into it, it suddenly becomes a postdoctoral thesis. It becomes really smart. Mm-hmm. And I see that as, people will argue with me about it, but in very broad strokes, that's sort of the difference between those two guys. So I think that the American blues music has informed British music from the start. British rock and roll, certainly.
But they were looking at it. The Brits were finding those great blues artists, the B.B. Kings, and all those guys that were being ignored in the States. Well,
they were being ignored in white culture,
yeah,
for sure, because of the race thing, right? It was race records. You couldn't get. You had to go to a special store to get this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's why. Elvis is so controversial. People just say he stole black music and put a white face on it. But Elvis was also, I think, pretty enormously gifted. I mean, when you hear those early Sun recordings where it's just like 3 or 4 guys in a room with a microphone, and you can hear the charisma and the, his gift on those early records. But yeah, he basically took what was black music, I think, and whitewashed it.
And being controlled to a degree as well with his management and the people around him, and
sure,
and the way the country operates, which
to say he whitewashed it is the wrong thing, and I don't want to get into a weird white black thing, but I just think that he was really influenced strongly by that, and also by country music, which in those days, and even further, was really powerful music. I mean, I'm not so crazy about what they're doing with it these days.
Yeah.
And it's funny, just briefly back to Nashville.
Yeah.
I was a jazz snob. Like, going to Nashville it did not interest me. I just wound up there, and I had this real snobby kind of jazzy attitude. Like, you guys, you hick guys, country music. No, thank you. They were absolutely the best musicians I'd ever played with till that point. They were the studio musicians in Nashville were heavy. And it was like, it's not that they couldn't play jazz. It's that they didn't want to play jazz. Right. Because if you called a jazz tune, they'd go, oh yeah, what key? And they would rip it up. And then, and you go, oh, I didn't expect that.
Why? I mean, why were they so good? Where does that come from?
Well, because they're making records all day long, and they're just, like that idea of Coltrane practicing 8 hours a day. These guys are practicing 8 hours a day to tape, to wax, and then that wax becomes a hit song. Like, so the stakes are very high, and they're the music. They have to be great musicians. And great ears, great feel, great chops.
Do you think you have to be? I mean, I think it's important to have a teacher or a mentor. And the people who argue against, oh, you don't need a mentor or a teacher, you just do it yourself. I always think, well, those people who do it themselves are playing with people who are really good, or they're around people who are really good, and they're being shown stuff. And so they're developing, in a sense, they're their teachers. That's the broader thing. It's like the Hendrix thing. It's like, well, he didn't have a teacher. Well, he was playing with some shit hot people as well.
Sure.
And they would go, he'd say, hey, what is that? And they'd say, oh, this is this. And then he'd go and practice this.
Yeah. Yeah.
It didn't just...
I used to say that my goal was to be the worst player in every band that I was in, because that it's just gonna make you better.
Yeah.
And I have but I think you invoked Jimmy. It's like he couldn't help himself. He was just so musical. There's people that are like that. They hear things differently. I think he did.
But he loved Clapton. I mean, he would he would freak out about what Clapton was doing, or
absolutely,
or George Harrison was doing.
No, he loved music. He loved good music.
Yeah.
of all kinds.
And so it all starts talking to each other, and that's what's really interesting. And it's kind of like when you come back to that Nashville thing, it's when it all starts talking to each other, and then it's like the Stevie Wonder stuff where it's jazzy but it's bluesy, and then there's this country thing, or there's some country chords in it that makes the untrained ear doesn't understand what it's hearing, but knows it's different.
Yeah, and it's agnostic, or it's like you take from whatever resonates with you. You don't go, well, that's that, so I'm not going to put it in my music. They collect it all up and they put it together and make it its own thing.
It just makes me think of Prince. I have to segue into Prince, but
I'm the biggest Prince fan, and it's funny because back in the old days, particularly the record that killed me was Love Sexy. I heard that record and I went, this man is a genius. And I remember talking to my jazz friends saying, it's like listening to Duke. By that time I'd like Duke Ellington, and they would go, I'm not hearing it, man. And I go, you got to listen harder. It's in there, and it really was. That record was an extraordinary piece of music.
Yeah, for me it was Sign of the Times, and
Yeah,
I
sure.
remember exactly when that came out. I was talking to my mum about it, and I remember the video for Sign of the Times itself, for that track, and calling her in the room and saying, "You've got to check this out. This is insane."
And that's, when was that? That's
80.
Yeah,
88?
it's like,
Was that too late?
I think that might be too late. But it's early music video time is what I'm getting at. It's kind of crude in terms of what music videos have become.
Just checking, doing a little Google search here and Sign of the Times.
He's got that. Okay.
Largely recorded March 87. It was
Oh,
first
very
released as
good.
a double album, 87. And yeah.
All right. Yeah.
And that album, and you go into Love Sexy, he was going to tour Sign of the Times in the UK. It got cancelled, and then he did the Love Sexy tour, which I don't know if you remember that concert, but
I sure do.
He played both. He played everything. He specifically Sign of the Times, and it was I got tickets for two different shows. I had 3rd row and 10th row, and he played it in the round at Wembley Arena.
Yeah, and he had that bed and that giant meshing, and he climbed up. Oh man! Oh, and the band rose up out of the center of the stage.
And he sat on the edge of the stage at one point, just picked up the guitar and just bluesed out on it. And
yeah, that was so cool. Didn't he show up in like a Thunderbird, T-Bird?
Yep.
But I heard that it was like a 0.75. He had it custom built so he wouldn't look like a midget.
Yeah, no, he was.
Midget's the wrong word. A small person.
We can't say that anymore. But it's meant with no intent.
Yes.
But yeah, so so Prince is a great example of incorporating all these ideas and influences, and you can hear you can hear the Hendrix, and you can hear,
oh my God,
you can hear the James Brown, and you can hear the brass instruments, the sax.
You can hear the Beatles in his music. You can hear the Stones in his music. You can hear he absolutely was a sponge. It's funny. I have a friend here. One of the things I love about Los Angeles is that the people who are part of television and music history live here, and periods that I love, the old timers are still here, and they want to talk about it, and you can talk to guys who were on those sessions, and you can talk to a really dear friend of mine was his recording engineer down here at Sunset Sound. And she talks about recording till like 10 in the morning. And then, okay, you can go home. And she would go home, and she'd just get home, and the phone would ring and be Prince. He'd go, "You got to come back in." So she would turn around and drive back in because he had another idea,
And he'd play those concerts. You talked about that need to play, that need to practice, to develop, and he'd play those concerts, and then he'd do a private gig straight after, and he'd keep going and keep going and keep going. Nobody could work like that.
Were you here when he was at the Greek for 30 days or whatever?
Oh, I vaguely remember.
Yeah, and I didn't go. I was busy working, and I never went. But I've seen him 3 times. One time, do you remember the soft theater tour he did in the small theaters?
What, he did in the latter years, or
this would have been maybe 2002.
Yeah.
He did a whole tour of soft seaters, of like 1,000, 2,000 seat, Orpheum style music houses. And I remember, and you couldn't dance, it was one of these things. So I got 10 tickets for all my friend. And you'd be at the con, and he's there. I'm 30 feet away from the guy, and he's on a stage that's 3 feet off the ground, and he's there. And you would just find yourself walking up to the stage, and a bouncer would grab you, he'd pick you up, and he'd take you back to your seat and he'd put you back down. And then the next thing you're back at the front of the stage again, just staring at him like, yes, master.
Yeah, you have no control over that.
It was uncontrollable. One of the incredible experiences. So that's why I didn't go to the Greek. Come on, man. How do you see it?
Yeah, I saw him at the was it the XL? It was huge. I was way too far away from the stage, and it was really like a greatest hits medley type show, and it wasn't as good as like the Love Sexy. And then he did that, and then he kind of reinvented himself again. And just before he died, I think we were going to have another incredible period of Prince, which is such a shame.
Yeah, it really is. He was working with a great singer here in town, Judith Hill. She's fantastic. And if you like Prince, you should check out Judith Hill's records, because he produced her last one. And then he died, and it was getting really good.
Yeah, it was. We were just kind of coming back to this kind of wow.
Yeah.
But
it's interesting.
So we've kind of journeyed and segued in through the music. So how do we actually get to writing for film and TV? Where does that come?
All right, that pesky question. No, like I said, I didn't want to be on the road. I had studio chops. I was familiar with studios. I'd been helping friends produce their records and stuff like that. And I kind of figured that, playing jazz is sort of like composing on your feet in real time in front of an audience, and it is in that way when you're improvising. And how exactly I got a friend of mine that I played with, a drummer, he was into composing and actually into computer music. And he said, you should do this. This is really fun and you're going to like it. So we started working together. I would write songs and stuff for the jazz bands that I was in, but I didn't really consider myself a composer, with quote marks. But I got more and more into writing and into orchestration, and just sort of a lot like my saxophone playing. Didn't go to school. It was self-taught. I'd get the books and learn how to do it and just transcribe it out and whatever. So I did a couple of little projects, but then I was living in a housing co-op it was kind of I don't know if it had a mandate for artists, but there was a few musicians and a few animators. And one of the animators was a guy named Danny Antonucci. And Danny was this imposing punk-looking dude, like 6'1", 6'2", with spiked hair. And at that time, he may have only had one or two tattoos, but he's now completely covered in tattoos. And a big leather jacket and the boots, and he played in a punk band. But we were neighbors, and our kids were about the same age. And the kids played together, and I talked to Danny, and he knew I was a musician, a jazz musician. He loved jazz. And we'd get together and hang out when the kids would play, and we found out we had a mutual love of Frank Sinatra. So we'd sit around listening to Frank Sinatra records, drinking scotch, and became very close friends. And then he was working at a place called International Rocket Ship, run by a guy named Marv Newland, who is probably most famous for Bambi Meets Godzilla, his short film. And he produced all the Gary Larson stuff, the Tales from the Dark Side and all those animated shows. Anyway, so Danny brought me into Rocket Ship to do music on his films, and I also would do sound effects, and so that was sort of the beginning of it in animation. And then from there into documentary, and then from there into long form narrative stuff. So yeah, at first, I had to keep touring because that's how I made money. But as the gigs got better and I got more of a reputation, I could tour less. I did a series with Danny called The Brothers Grunt on MTV. And this is back in the mid 90s around there. Mid 90s. And Beavis and Butthead had just come out, and MTV were high on animation, so they were making new shows. This is one of the shows that they made because Danny had done a station ID for them with these crazy grunting characters, and he just took that concept and spun it out into a series. And these brothers, the brothers Grunt, who didn't speak, all they did was grunt, were trying to find their lost brother, and there was like a grand poobah, and then they would mix it in with early MTV music videos. So you'd be watching an episode of the brothers Grunt, and they're grunting around and doing all kinds of crazy shit, and then they'd show a video and superimpose over top of the video the brothers chasing around over top, animated over top of a video, Duran Duran video or whatever. Anyway, so that was met with a resounding thud. So that was the end of. We did quite a few episodes. I think we did 70 episodes of that. Huh. But it was a very interesting thing. And at one point, I had written a theme for the show, and then they said, and Tony Bennett was just starting to take off again after having a bit of a lull in his career, and MTV were pushing his music, and they said, we need a vocal theme for the show, and Tony Bennett will sing it. And so I got to write a theme for Tony Bennett to sing, and I was pretty excited. I can assure you, cool. I was very excited. And then they decided they weren't going to use Tony Bennett, and they went in another direction, and they went with some Frank Sinatra sound alike. And I didn't write that theme. Someone else wrote that theme.
I hate that sentence. They went in another direction.
Isn't it terrible?
It's just a horrible. It just happens in the acting and the music.
We loved what you did. We're just going in another direction. I can go in that direction. I can go there. Watch me.
Oh my God! It's the intro in Tootsie with Dustin Hoffman. Do you remember when
is it?
It's similar. He's he's like, we're sorry, you're too tall. Oh, it's okay. I'm wearing lifts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I can take them out. I can be shorter. I can be taller. You're just not right.
Yeah, we don't like you.
Yeah, just get out. Leave me alone. So the other thing that's interesting is, so as a saxophonist, do you start playing other instruments? What happens then? How does, is the composing with a pen and paper, or do you start learning the piano, or do other instruments just sort of, you start picking up other instruments, guitars?
Yes, to all of those questions.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. You learn composer's piano basically as a jazz musician, because you're pulling through. You want to hear harmonies and you want to practice the piano. And I certainly would never play a gig on the piano, but I can play tunes on a piano. And I was a big guitar fan, as you can probably tell from my Prince and Jimi Hendrix love. Mm-hmm. And so I had a guitar. I'm a guitar owner. I own a couple over there, but I'm not a guitar player. So, so you sort of learn to play them. I used to say, I know just enough to get into trouble, but not enough to get back out again. And then with other instruments, especially when you start writing for, more traditional orchestral stuff, sorry about that. I should have turned all this stuff off. But anyway, so as a sax player, I also play the flute and clarinet. So the woodwinds are sort of handled. I played in R&B bands. I played beside trumpets and trombones. I learned what those instruments could do, and I wrote for those instruments in jazz context. And then with the orchestra, I own a cello, and you learn you just learn. You learn how to play it and what's possible on it and what's not possible, and you kind of have to, and you have to know what the sound of them is and where they sound good and where they don't sound good. And
so you're not translating from one to, it's not like you start dreaming in another language.
No, it's not like that. But it happens the work happens inside in your head, and then it's the getting it out part. I'm not. There's that great Amadeus, where basically the composing all happens in his head, and then he just has to write it out. And I'm certainly no Mozart.
Too many notes.
Yeah, really. Which ones do you think I should take out? But yeah, the composing and the conceptualizing all happen in your head, and then you put it up. Now, certainly, there's been a lot of changes in the way music is made for media. I've done a lot of jazz oriented work. I've done a lot of traditional orchestral sounding stuff, and now there's a lot of kind of sound design, sampler, synthesizer stuff, and so that's a whole other frontier that I love to work in and sort of learn how these instruments work and how to translate between what I would hear normally with a group of cellos to this synthesizer over here with some distortion and an LFO on it. So it's really actually exciting and gratifying to keep changing and learning this stuff.
So it's still relevant for you. It's still exciting. It's still challenging and gets you up in the morning.
That's what I spend my time doing when I'm not working, is studying and practicing.
Uh-huh. So actually, let's spin back to the animation because that's important in your story as well. So you were doing that MTV stuff, and it's the Danny Antonucci.
That's right.
And then there's a big show that comes along. Is this in this time period, or am I jumping? It's
just afterwards, just after the Brothers Grunt. Danny was hired by Cartoon Network to make a show called Ed, Edd and Eddy, which ran for 10 years. It's the longest running show on Cartoon Network. We did 175 episodes and 3 specials and a feature. And it was fantastic. And that was kind of a jazz sound. That was a 6-piece band, and I wrote the music and went into the studio and recorded it with a live band for every episode. And it was fantastic. It was just really a great experience. And Danny and I are so close, and he's such a great collaborator that we had a shorthand, and we could sit down and watch an episode, and he'd say, you know what I want here, and yeah, you know this, and you know that, and let's do this here. And then I would do it, and he'd come into the studio, and I'd have the band there, and we'd run through it with the picture. And if there was anything that he thought I missed, he'd kind of go, this isn't, I was thinking it would be something different. So I could then go out on the floor, say, okay, guys, we're going to do this. And I'd write it down for them. You do this, you do that. You hold your tongue this way. You stand on one foot. Here we go. Let's take, and we'd fix it. And so, we did that from 99 to 2009.
So will you watch an episode? Would you take an episode home and start composing around that episode, or so you're composing to the actual episode as it happens, and marking it out?
In fact, right here, this is a page from the big picture. It says Ed's Big Picture Show, BPS, which was the feature film. So I'd bring this in, and the musicians would all look at the same page, so I could say, oh, okay, trumpet, you play with the trombones playing down an octave or up an octave or whatever, and make changes like that. So that I would write the music and then orchestrate the music and get up at 6 a.m. if I wasn't already up from the night before, and make 7 copies at Kinko's and go into the studio, and the guys would be there at 10, and we'd knock out a show in a couple hours, take a break, knock out the next show. It was a nice time. I miss it, man.
Would you be playing, or are you just producing and directing that?
No, I wouldn't play on these things.
Right.
I had to be on the other side of the glass, sitting with Danny, talking about it. Is this working? Is this what we want? Do you like that? Do you like that? Huh? How much do you like it? Do you like it that much? Do you like it more? How much do you like it?
Amazing. And
it was fun.
And so was that a springboard for you? Did that segue into the film work and the TV work, or was that going alongside?
It was kind of parallel, but it was a great job for sort of, I could relax. I didn't have to hustle because it paid me well, and it was popular. So I knew that it had legs. It was going to move forward. I believe, we would get 2-year contracts, and you go, okay, wow, we're going to make, I don't know, what would that be? That would be, or, we're going to make, I can do the math. I've done this 32 episodes, over the next 2 years. And animation is a pretty slow process, but it's slow until it isn't. Then it's really fast. And usually the really fast part is when they need the music.
And are you in Canada at this point?
Yeah. I'm in Vancouver.
So there's a big feature film that you got an award for.
Right. That was
2001?
2001. So, right. So the Eds started in 1999. Mm-hmm. 2 years later, I won it was called the Genie Award at the time. That's like the Canadian Academy Award or the BAFTA for a movie called Here's to Life that starred Ozzie Davis and Jim Whitmore. Is that who it is? I just saw him in a movie last night on TV. Mm-hmm. And Nancy. Okay, some people. It was a great movie. Eric McCormick was in it, and it was about people in an old folks' home. And I recorded that with an orchestra. That was great. I remember the producer, now no longer on this side of the veil, Bill Vince. I played him the music, with the samples and the computers and everything. And he goes, "That sounds good. Would it sound better with real orchestra?" And I go, "Uh-huh." and he goes, "About how much would that cost?" And I said, "I don't know, roughly X, and he went, "Okay, do it." It was like, all right, that was great. And then it also completely changed because now you've got to get this music recorded, hire the musicians, get it all written out and get in there and record it. Because the mix date didn't move. It's like I'm playing him the music a few days before the actual mix, and he goes, "Yeah, it sounds nice. Would it sound better with orchestra?" "Yes." "Do it." Ah,
right. But then then the experience kicks in. Then all the other stuff that you've done.
Yeah, and the panic,
and
the coffee. Actually, it's funny. Speaking of that. In order to do those kind of all-nighter things, no stimulants. I would not drink coffee. The only thing I would do is drink water, because you might get the lift.
Yeah.
But I couldn't fight the crash,
yeah.
So it's like strictly water and vegetables until I'm through this thing.
Interesting. And so you're still in. So what year do you come out to live in LA?
2005.
Right, so this is another 4 years.
Yeah, but at this point, I was coming back and forth on kind of a regular basis because I had shows that were, I was also doing a show called The Dead Zone, and that was fantastic. I can't remember when that started. But I had friends down here, and I would come down and take meetings and get an agent and do that whole thing and try to expand my empire. And eventually I did. I moved down here and did a show for ABC Family Channel called Wildfire that first year starred Dennis Weaver, and he died, but we got 3 more seasons out of it. I worked with a production company here, Pillar Segan, for several years, and that was great. They were very helpful in getting me into the country. And then, yeah. Then 2009 happened, the writer's strike, the actor's strike, the business just shit the bed.
Mm-hmm.
And everything kind of came to an end around that time.
Yeah,
actually.
and I remember because I came out here in 2010 for 6 months, and it was at the end. I couldn't come out here any earlier because of the crash, and then there was everything that happened here.
Pesky economic downturn.
Yeah. So it's even with what's going on now, we talked about it the other day. If you look to history, if you look to where these things have happened before, it's actually reassuring because you go, yeah, it happened before.
Yeah, we'll be back.
We'll be back, and don't buy into all the negative shit that the papers want to promote because
I call it the panic hour. Yeah. Just stay away from it.
And it's true, panic and fear are tension related, and if you have tension, you can't move. So you can either be like this and buy into that. And it's really interesting with all of that. You see, if you look at all the papers, if you go back with the pandemic even, or even before the pandemic and economic crashes coming, and all they do is predict negative that never happen. So they might get one thing that happens, but most things that this might happen. A downturn might happen. Aliens might arrive and kidnap you.
Yeah.
And I guarantee if you look at and it's, you can look at all, we're segueing into viruses, but, if you look at the original newspaper reports when the AIDS pandemic occurred.
I haven't done that.
Would be interesting. They were talking about getting AIDS from toilet seats and,
right.
Yeah.
And they were also talking about it being a military invention, which seems crazy. But wait a second. Am I saying conspiracy theories are crazy?
You've got the tin hat I've sent you, haven't you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. It's around here.
Great. So I'm interested in this idea and going further in how you compose and how you develop an idea. You were going to play me a couple of ideas. In terms of the writing, I was trying to think about how I can best describe it. I don't do just sort of one thing, I do a bunch of everything, and hopefully I'm good at it. But sometimes you need a song written, and I'll write the song and write the words and get someone to come in and sing it. And other times it needs to be, an atmospheric droney kind of thing. Other times it needs to be. Actually, there was a show that I did on Fox called Rake, that was a American version of a very successful Australian show. The Australian show was incredible. Sadly, the American version didn't catch on for probably a myriad of reasons. If they knew why stuff caught on, it wouldn't be any fun anymore. But it had problems, and it only lasted for one season. But the same guy who created the Aussie show came up here and ran this show. He was the showrunner, and he wanted. Well, it's hard to say what he wanted because he was difficult to read. But my take on it was that he wanted some kind of like, not circus music, but music that was just nearly out of control. Because this person, this rake, who was played by Greg Kinnear, his life is out of control. And so it just always sounded to me like it had to be almost like Fellini in a way, but just the wheels are about to come off, but they still manage to stay on at the same time. So it was interesting because I had watched a lot of his stuff. I watched every episode of the Australian version, and the music was uneven, but parts of it were really
fantastic, but I didn't want to just copy that. So I had to come up with my own version of it. And maybe I'll play you just one of these things because I like it because it's so weird. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
And you're specifically allowing yourself to be influenced by the original version.
No. In fact, I'm looking
away from it, right?
Yeah. And why are you behaving this way? Oh, I know. There you go. No, this is a complete reimagining of that show. This is So this is like 40 seconds of a Fellini clubfoot orchestra. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Let's find out. It wants to go. So, and that all I just played that all happened in here. I played all those instruments, steel guitars and a cello, and there's like a melodica, and so that was my idea of what his internal monologue is.
That's like I'm hearing Kurt Weill and Tom Waits.
Exactly.
I'm just waiting for Tom Waits to start singing.
Yeah, you nailed it, or I nailed it. We nailed it. That's exactly it.
I have very little to do with it. Nothing to do with it, in fact. Yeah, that's great. That's great. You can hear that. I mean, I love it. The influences are apparent.
Yeah, that's great. And Kurt Weill I adore Kurt Weill.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, again, it's like Nino Rota and Fellini, and it's just it's circusy. You can smell it's gamey, and it's like a lovely Pinot.
And we have drunk a few lovely Pinots.
Oh, we have. We've choked a few of those down. Yeah. But so that was that. You're asking about the process for composing. That was one thing, and then let me play you something else here that I'll only play a little piece of it, but it's more electronic. But I got a violinist to come in. This is from a web series I did that was sort of these dystopian horror dreams called Mythos. So, I mean, that's all. So some weird dreamlike world that
Looking for something
our
that can't be
heroine,
found.
who is oh, I'm not hearing you.
Sorry, I
Are
said
you saying something?
it made me think of looking for something that can't be found, yearning but
Yeah.
not quite finding.
The protagonist in this is a mental institution patient who's been nonverbal for years, and so this is what goes on inside of her. She doesn't speak, and so the violin is her voice.
It's astounding thing about music as well, that it has such a distinct and clear narrative. It's, it could be words, but the music, immediately I go, oh, that's saying this.
But you're musical, so you would also be associating it that way. But I hopefully, when as a composer, hopefully what I write, whatever I write, is evocative of that, imaginative. It's fertile, and your imagination can. It's supposed to be. It is supporting a picture. It's not absolute music. It's to support the thing.
But it's a subconscious effect it has on the listener. So the musical person, yes, I think in those terms. That's how I think, and how I see things, and I'm affected emotionally by those sounds. But I think everybody is subconsciously, even if they don't realize it, and that's what's so powerful about scores and music for TV and film, and those hitting those wonderful moments where those absolute scores that become part of our musical knowledge.
God, for sure.
What are those for you?
Oh boy. Well, again,
Ennio Morricone, I suppose.
Oh well, no, Nino Rota. I mean that. Oh my God, kills me.
Mm-hmm.
Those kind of melodies, and then
I was Once Upon a Time in America.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah. Da-da-da. Well, pan flute. I have them up there.
Oh yes. Yeah.
I did it. Yeah. I'm a huge Morricone fan, and a huge Nino Rota fan. I just think they're remarkable, and American, obviously, American music as well. But that stuff, it's almost tactile. It's
mm-hmm.
like, it seems to engage more than just these things. It engages taste and smells. And
do you come across music when you look at film? I mean, there's a balance, like you said, because it's there to support the image and the story and the acting and the film. Are there times where you think the music supersedes that and does too much and gets in the way?
Wow. Yeah, sure. And it can definitely get in the way. I kind of feel like music is a little bit like a dance partner with the movie, and if it's done well, it's connected, and it just sort of floats through it, and you can't see where the movie ends and the music begins, that they all become this one thing. Mm-hmm. Not everyone feels that way, and I'm certainly more than happy to provide something that's less sort of integrated, if you want to call it that, so that's more sort of pushed into the background. You're making me think of something I have here in my little list. Maybe mm-hmm. I'll play it for you.
I mean, because even with the sci-fi, the dystopian music, the silences and the moments where there is nothing help the bits where there are. I mean,
that's right. And it's kind of like great music is knowing when not to play. Mm-hmm. They talk about that in terms of jazz guys. It's not the notes he plays; it's the one he leaves out that are so heavy.
Yeah.
But just on that, I did another web series there's a Canadian web series called Save Me, which is about first responders, timely stuff, about EMTs showing up.
Yeah, I know. Who was in that? That rings a bell.
Well, there's a Save Me here. This is the Canadian version.
Right.
And this was a very atmospheric score. Just kind of just a mood more than anything. I think this is the cue. Let me check it out. Hang on. No, let's try this one. So that's that, and that's maybe the last time I played the saxophone.
So when was that?
That was 2 years ago.
So why? Actually, that's a good point. Why have you not played the saxophone?
Well, I really miss it, but I play it. On this I played some saxophone. Most of the music I've been writing for the last 2 years, that's not the bag. I mean, it's more orchestral.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing, as the order, and some horror stuff and some action movie stuff, and so saxophone doesn't really fit in. This, I loved that harmonized saxophone vibe, sort of haunting. Again, memory piece, very introspective. And I wanted the sound of a breath, and to my ears, nothing sounds like the human voice and breathing more than the saxophone, other than the human voice and breathing. But if you put a voice in there, suddenly you got to go, are there words? What are we doing now? And if there are words, they're going to get in the way. You have to clear for dialogue. And also when you put words on stuff, then you're actually giving it meaning and you're focusing it in on something. And
yeah, that one made me think of almost like sitting in a train, long distance, looking out the window with a bit of rain on the window into sort of
daydreamy kind of
fields and clouds, and not really focusing in on the environment, seeing it pass you by.
Yeah, it's a little wistful,
yeah.
If I may say so myself.
You may.
Yes.
And just what you said with the voice, the only person I can think of that does that without words is someone like Bobby McFerrin.
Yeah, actually, Let me play you something.
Mm-hmm.
Let me play you this. We had this, the creator, showrunner of the show, Fab Filippo, wanted a theme for the end of, not a theme, but a song for the end of this series. And so I wrote one.
This is Save Me, yeah?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote some words. And he's a writer. He's a great writer. And we're really good friends. And I sent him the theme with just, I forget what I'd used for a melody instrument. And then I sent some words along. And he goes, no, I don't like those words. I think something more like, just like la 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 la. And I just like, I get this. I'm going, this is a joke, right? You want me to do a song with la 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 la, like doody doody do what? And he goes, no, I really just try it. And I was pretty angry, but I tried it. And turns out he was right.
Yeah. It's hopeful and happy and positive and looking forward to the next thing.
Yeah, he was right. Who knew?
But no, it's a great thing. I was talking to on another podcast where I talked to a magician friend of mine, and we did a show together, and he had a specific thing in the show that he wanted to do, and I said, you can't do that. It was kind of endangering the health of an audience member. Ultimately, he was sitting on them, and I said, no, we can't do that. And I said, you better come up with something else. He's like, no, but it's so funny, it's brilliant. I'm like, no, you can't do that. I'm the director, so if you don't like it, get another director. And it forced him into that way of thinking and thinking, okay, well, how can I do it? And then he came up with something else. And so when the parameters are put on you, you've got to find something. Like,
it's a variation on necessity being the mother of invention, you know. Mm-hmm. And there's another side to it where, in a world of infinite possibilities, you can be paralyzed.
Yeah.
But when you've got a very narrow set of parameters, that's where you can really start to grind it out, and these incredible ideas will come up. And anyway, it's cool.
Yeah,
that's fun. That's fun the way that worked out in the conversation.
Yeah. And it's great we kind of found that music. So I'm conscious of the time, and we.
Oh my God, we're having too much fun, Paul.
We can go on as long as you're happy to, but let's just move on to where we are now. Really, I think that's a good.
Okay, good.
A good point. You've got upcoming project. You mentioned The Order.
It premiered today.
And
today is the premiere of season 2
season
of
two
The Order on Netflix.
on
Yes.
Netflix. So I assume that's worldwide, and the UK and the US and Canada.
Yeah.
And
The known universe, according to my contract.
oh, nice. We like those contracts. Oh, do we like those contracts? I
No, we
know.
don't.
They're not what they were, I
No.
guess. How do you think, actually, out of interest, the finance, the business side of being a musician or a film composer, school writer, has it changed? Is it
Oh yeah,
for the
it's changed.
worse,
I mean,
for the better?
it's a question of supply and demand, right?
Hmm?
Uh, in a time when there was sort of a barrier to entry into composing, because you needed a studio and you needed an orchestra and you needed players and you needed all these things, very few people could get in, and the people that did get in, it was very expensive to get to that point. So when I started in the business, there openings were occurring, but it was coming down from this pretty, high burn rate in terms of money. So over the last 20 years, you may have heard of this little thing called the internet. And, now everyone has a recording studio in their laptop. And here we are. And so there's many, many more people that are interested and willing to work on it. And this isn't to say that their work is bad. I mean, it can be great. And there's some really wonderful stuff that's coming out from people that just don't know what they can't not do, Mm-hmm. And so they invent something new and you go, wow, that's brilliant. And so, there's been a downward pressure based on a large supply of composers, and the demand also going up because now we're filling every nanosecond of every living, breathing moment. You've got music on your phone, you've got it in the elevator, you've got it everywhere. But there's a whole bunch of people qualified and willing to do it. Many just to do it. Many that, they have sure, they'd love to get paid, but they'll do it for nothing because they love to do it. And so, I mean, it makes sense that the dynamics would change around that. And so you need to keep, I think you need to stay hungry. You need to keep finding new opportunities and finding ways to maximize your output. And hopefully, there's some things that I believe are unfair and inequitable about the way the royalties, for example, are working. Streaming, I think, is really a drag because, the Spotify artists aren't getting rich, but Spotify's getting rich. So how are they getting rich? Well, I don't know. They just gave Joe Rogan $100 million. Couldn't some of that have gone to some of those artists that are making $1,000 a year for their million plays? It's like, dude, I think so. I do think that things need to be sorted out.
Do you think you brought up a good point, and I love a big fan of the Joe Rogan podcast.
As we all are. Yeah.
And if anyone deserved that fee, I can see why they paid him. I can see their value in that. Do you think that's going to help change their platform? Do you think that there's going to be a bit more balance? Because they're going to be a YouTube competitor come September. I mean, there's no question about it. They're going to video, and it's
yeah.
And there's a kind of bully boy in the YouTube scenario as well. And so competition usually is helpful. But how do we maintain value? Because, you're talking about the same thing that actors face, that magicians face,
Absolutely.
that the industry faces. There was an article in the Times, I believe, in the UK, where they looked at the most essential businesses and the least essential businesses. And in that article, number 2 of the least essential businesses were telemarketers, and number 1 was artists.
I saw that.
which is amazing considering come pandemic, the only thing I saw on Facebook before virtue signaling was I had to get it in there.
You did, you
snaggle. One of the the only question I saw was, what shall I watch on Netflix? Oh, please tell me what to watch. Oh, I'm going to binge this. I'm going to binge that. Sopranos is number 2. I think HBO's number 2 show at the moment, or number 1 show.
Well, it's a great show.
It's one of the greatest all time, but, value, quality. Yeah. Hopefully value and quality win out, but do you have any power in that? Making sure that you maintain value?
No, not that I know of. I mean, maybe I just need to work harder at it. I know some people are thriving, and they've found a way to make it work for them. I don't see it. I don't see it as such a great opportunity. I scratch my head. I kind of go, well, you don't have the money to compensate the music people, but this business choice, obviously they're not going to give him $100 million unless they're going to make $200 million off of him,
And I think their share rate went up astronomically the minute it was announced.
Oh, that's great for everybody.
Yeah.
But you could actually start to compensate musicians, the people that built your business.
Mm-hmm.
They're making billions.
There's always someone making the money, and
it's not the artists.
Yeah, it's not.
And the artists are the content creators.
Yeah,
so I think this whole thing needs to be reviewed, whether it's from the artist side and how to monetize and how to maximize, or from the administrative side about what is reasonable and fair compensation for the value that they're getting. So I think the whole thing needs a sort of a retooling.
So
and that has to be, that has to come from the top down. It's not the company's not going to go, you're right, we'll give you a bunch more money. It has to be imposed on them.
And maybe the Joe Rogans of this world as well have some power now as well. And I
don't think Joe's going to be arguing for us to for the music to get more money on Spotify.
Right.
Maybe. I don't know. Be interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting time, and I think the competition is a good thing, and exciting. So you've got there's quite a few things you've got coming out. You've got Sniper: Assassin's End.
That's right. That came out 2 days ago. That's on video on demand.
Tom Berenger.
Tom Berenger's in it. Yeah. It was really fun to do, and that was a score that was all synth and percussion mostly, and it was really fun. Kari Andrews, who's a graphic novelist, directed it, and he brought this really fantastic sensibility to the show, and then when we started working on the music, he brought it into the music too, and for me it was a really rewarding experience. And then also, I just finished a movie last year with a collaborator I've worked with many times, a woman named Karen Lamb, who's a horror movie maker. And in fact, I played one of the cues was from the one about the mental patient, silent, nonverbal mental patient. That was one of her pieces. And this, I'm not sure she's got distribution, but everything's all upside down with the COVID, right? So normally her movie would do the festival circuit, but now there is no festival circuit. And her movie is called The Curse of Willow Song. And it's, Karen's themes are very kind of universal and iconic, and they're I don't want to call them agendified, but they're perspectives that you don't normally see. This is a story of a woman, an Asian woman, a minority female in a situation where she's trying to get her life turned around. And she shot it all in black and white. It looks gorgeous. And it's another, from a musical point of view, it's a very industrial kind of gritty, we're not trying to make pretty things here. It's great. I love it. So only watch for that one. Watch for Willow's, The Curse of Willow Song. Assassin's End is available now on video on demand, and The Order is season 2 on Netflix.
And are you working on something now? Is there upcoming work?
I'm doing your podcast.
That's all that matters.
I'm taking a break until well, actually the whole business is kind of shut down, as you know.
Right.
So I'm just doing personal work. I'm practicing the piano and studying music the way I always do, listening and transcribing. Back to the woodshed.
And one more question I'd like to ask, actually, is if a young person or an older person is listening to this, and their dream is to write score or film music, where would you start? What's the...
Put $10,000 in an envelope and leave it in my mailbox.
Okay.
That's a great question. In fact, I went for a walk this morning with another composer friend of mine where we were talking about this exact same thing. There's the schools you can go to. You can go to Berkeley, you can go to UCLA, you can go to USC. Great film scoring programs there where you will meet a network of people and, go in that route. I didn't go to school. I'm self-taught and self-motivated and dug in that way. I think really the important thing is to have a voice and you can practice your craft without having a job, or you can have a day job and still write music and still get things and still develop as an artist. It's not easy, but neither is going to school, frankly. I mean, you go to school for 4 years and you wind up with $250,000 debt that you've got to pay off. I mean, I don't know, man. That's another thing. We're not going to get into politics, but that's another thing that's got to get sorted out is the cost of education.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you've got a situation here where you might as well give the money to the student and say, here, open a business. Here's however $100,000s of dollars it costs to. You might as well not waste your time going to college. Here's the $100,000s. Start something up. Do it yourself.
Yeah. But I think, to answer your question from a young person or an old person wanting to get into the business, I mean, they need to have something to represent themselves. So make work, make stuff, watch shows, write music for shows, listen to shows, see how the music is working, have a perspective on it, because then you can have a conversation with the filmmaker and they say, well, I've got this movie and you're a composer. What do you think should happen here? And then you can kind of go, well, if it's like The Mission, or if it's like The Sopranos, or if it's like this, or it's like that, I think I want to hear this. I want to hear Kurt Weill. I want to hear Kurt Weill, like the new one, so it's like,
it's point of view. It's point of view. Have a point of view, and have, what I see certainly with actors, which I find just it's terrible, and it's not all obviously, but they haven't done their research. They don't know what came before. They don't know the history. They've got nothing to springboard off. And just even what we've been talking about, it's, you mentioned something and I can talk about that reminds me of.
Yeah.
We've got somewhere to build our point of view, our perspective. Without that point of view, where are you have to imitate in order to create.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. And, this reminds me of something. I studied with David Liebman in New York in 1985. And that was challenging and interesting. And he's a great teacher. And one of the things he told me to do, he said, get I went to him for a lesson, and he goes, okay, well, between now and our next lesson, get Sonny Rollins' album Live at the Village Vanguard, Volume 1 or 2, it doesn't matter, and learn every note on it, and then come back and we'll continue the lessons. And I don't know, I was maybe sitting there. He goes, what's wrong, man? I mean, what's that look on your face mean? And I said, well, what if I don't want to sound like Sonny? And he goes, believe me, man, you never will. And it was at the time I thought he was cutting me, And then I realized that you can't. I'm not going to sound like Sonny, but I'll learn a shitload if I study him and learn every note that he ever did. Mm-hmm. So that wasn't the point of the exercise. The point wasn't to sound like Sonny. The point was to learn everything that Sonny had to teach me. And it was a beautiful thing. So you say you have to imitate before you can create. This is exactly that same thing, the same idea.
Well, I think that's a perfect point to end this conversation.
Me too, man. This has been really fun.
Yeah.
And thanks a lot.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. I think it's really interesting. I think we've delved into quite a few areas which were, it was good to get into, and it's good to hear the music and contextualize and hopefully inspire, because I think the point of all of this, yes, we're creating content, yes, but from my perspective, it's about finding interesting, creative people and inspiring. If it inspires me, if I'm interested, somebody else must be.
I hope so. I hope we've achieved that in this last 2 hours. That's great.
Absolutely. So thanks a lot, Patric.
Thank you, Paul.
We'll put some links and stuff.
I'll see you at Fight Night.
We'll see you at Fight Night. I hope we can be in the same room at some point.
I would love it.
I look forward to it.
Okay, man.
Thank
Peace
you
and love.
Very much. Okay.
See you.
See ya.